This episode contains topics related to trauma healing and recovery, including trauma caused by sexual assault, coming out, fat phobia, and body shaming. It also contains explicit language used conversationally. Listener discretion is advised. Thank you.
Welcome to the Queer Witch Project, your resource for all things queer and witchy. I am Damona Peacock, your fabulous, non-binary, neurospicy, ordained queerdo. Oh, with a hyperfixation for all things symbolism, cycles, and patterns.
And I am Moon Kitty, a queer femme poly kitchen witch, and I am a proud geek. Today's topic is witchy approaches for queer healing. With us today is Victoria Dragonfly, who has a master's in counseling and psychology, and she is a professional clinical counselor.
Yes, let's welcome our guest. Welcome to the Queer Witch Project, Victoria Dragonfly.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be your first guest.
I would like to read your bio, tries to encapsulate all that you are, and, definitely shines a radiant light. And I want people to know who we're talking to. So this is my friend, Victoria Dragonfly. They are a queer, neurodivergent witch, writer, musician, and dancer, a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence. V is a mental health professional who works at the intersection of magic and trauma recovery. They believe that recovery is best framed as liberation, and that our efforts to dismantle the systems of oppression must be a natural outpouring of our recovery efforts. They live in Santa Cruz, California, with their 2 children and 2 cats.
Welcome in. And again, thank you for being our first guest.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Thanks.
So, V, is it okay if I call you V for this?
Yeah, V is fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does the term queer witch mean to you?
That's such a good question. And I was thinking about it before I came on here. I think that for me, my exploration of queerness, because I didn't come out until I was 36. So I went much of my life not knowing that I was having an experience of being a queer person, because it wasn't safe to be one. For me, I think that being queer and being a witch are inherently linked. I think that, if I'm doing something in the world, I'm sure not doing it in a straight way. So that means that for me, being a queer witch means that I'm rejecting a lot of archetypes, that are sort of tied to heterosexuality and heteronormativity and compulsory heteronormativity as well. So for me, it just means that I am questioning everything constantly, and trying to find what is authentic for me as a person, not, just like what we say that it should be done. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. And would you say that you've had a similar journey with your spirituality?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I celebrated my first ritual it was the end of 2015, the very end of 2015. I just gone through some pretty major life upheavals, a divorce the year before. And so I was like, I think I want to try this solstice thing. And I finished it, and I had spent a lifetime in the church. And so immediately when I did that, I was like, oh, this is why they burned us. Because for me, it was like, I just celebrated my own mass or liturgy or whatever, and I wrote it myself. And I think that's very much what we do as queer people. We say, this doesn't fit. This closet isn't for us. I don't like it in here. It's not comfortable. The fabrics are scratchy. Let me just come on out. And I know it's going to be a challenge, but I also know that staying here is going to kill me. So I'm going to have to sort of choose my own adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that I recently saw a meme floating around on the interwebs, the prophet of the interwebs, that said, choosing to be visibly queer is choosing happiness over safety.
Yeah.
Or something to that effect.
Right. And go ahead. Yeah.
I also feel like it's a service when you can be visibly queer for all those who aren't safe enough to do so.
Right. You know, in a sense, me being openly queer and polyamorous and a witch now is like reparenting the version of myself that was a child and, you know, growing up in the Silicon Valley and like seeing queer people once in a while, but being told some very violent things about them by my parents. It's sort of like healing myself. And so I'm sort of seeing that representation that I did not myself have, and showing that representation to others. A few weeks ago, I had the honor of going to read for high school seniors at their senior picnic. And I was sitting there and I was like, just so blessed to be among these incredibly wise young people. And I was like, God, like, I wish I could have had me when I was this age, you know?
Right.
So yeah.
No, it's definitely a challenge for those of us who are on the older end of the community. And I hate saying older end because we're not. We're gorgeous. We
No.
are young. We are everything in between, but we are not Gen Alpha or Gen Z, any of us. But it's a challenge because again, there's so many things that we didn't have that this generation has, and I love seeing that. I'm with Damona very much on that,
Yeah.
and that challenge of coming out and finding you being able to be both in your own element as a witch and in your own element as a queer person, I think is incredibly difficult because
Uh-huh.
as queer folk, most of us have struggled to find that kind of authenticity
Sure.
within that structure of heteronormativity, the binary genders, and
Right.
overall just feeling outside of that norm. So getting into kind of our next question is what are some of the approaches that we can use as witchy folk that help us process through that trauma and help us learn to trust our intuition?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I think that personal growth and trauma healing is very much tied to the work we do as witches. And because every spell that we cast is sort of a snapshot of where we are. And it's also a snapshot of where we've been because we're bringing all of the different subconscious materials with us. In terms of trauma healing, though, I think that learning to trust your own intuition is just so important. And that's one of the things that we really take baby steps towards when we head down the left-hand path. You know, when we start working on that, we sort of, we have teachers and mentors and guides who come to us, which is lovely, but we also are saying like, what can I root down to like what's really authentically true for me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And that being different than what might be authentically true for someone else.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Remind me of the question again.
What can we use? What some of the approaches that we can use as witchy folk that help us process through? So, what kind of tools or suggestions or things that can help us do that? Because we all have some form of trauma. As a queer person, you have that inherent trauma of being outside that structure of something else, and as identifying in that kind of witchy sense, whatever spicy flavor of which you identify as, and again, there are so many of them as we know, but that's also different. So how and being different causes its own kind of trauma. So what are some of the things? What are some of the tools? What are some of the steps that we can do? Places and resources, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you rephrasing the question because
Oh,
sometimes
sure,
we're both
absolutely.
get distracted. I think that for me personally, I can't necessarily speak to what works for everyone, but I
Hmm.
know that for me, very concrete tools have helped a lot. So, relying on a deck of cards, joyful movement, like sort of divesting myself from like, I need to move in a specific way for someone else, but learning how to do things like have a yoga practice and a dance practice that's just for me, that works
Hmm.
for my body and my pain levels on that day, and honoring that as opposed to being like, you need to do this type of way, this type of thing, can be really helpful. And the big thing that comes to me with those of us who were, raised highly sensitive, probably had like some serious religious trauma, is the lack of connection and the lack of co-regulation that we're dealing with.
Hmm.
And so I think that for us, being able to find that connection, finding it within ourselves, reconnecting with our child selves, and also finding it among our chosen family is super, super important. And we have such a deeper understanding of like how to respect other people's experiences that it does bring us together.
Yeah, chosen family is definitely a topic we bring up fairly often here because as
Yes.
that's part of the queer experience. Not that non-queer identified folk don't experience what it feels like to have chosen family, but that so many of us don't have any other family without our chosen family. So you mentioned the tarot, and what other kind of do you ever work with spirit guides? You mentioned also intuition, spirit guides. What other kind of like therapeutic systems do you like kind of marry with your witchy practices to experience, like, how does like the witchy practices inform your therapeutic practices that inform your queer healing?
Yeah, no, it's such a great question. I work with a pretty large pantheon of folks, in other parts of dimensions, I guess you could say. I have some guides, some spirit guides who have been with me since I can remember them since 3 years old. So those are with me, and as I have started to open those channels back up, which was a conscious decision that I had to make, I was extremely sensitive as a kid, and as a young adult, I was constantly being hazed by the spirit world, essentially, because I didn't know the thing that which is like, if you tell something to go away, it has to leave you alone. And so it took me a long time, and I actually shut everything down. I closed all those channels within myself. And then I reached a point in my life after I had my second son that I was kind of on a transformation cycle. And I said, okay, I'm ready, come at me, essentially. And they did. And so I finally was able to teach myself a little bit better regulation inside of that. So I do have spirit guides. I have a couple, they're deities that I work with periodically. I've worked with Venus a lot. I work with Hecate sometimes. She's actually on my altar back here. I lit her candle. She wanted some money today. I don't know why, but
I mean,
yes.
the dark moon.
And I want to honor her too, because the work that I do with clients is very much intersection, crossroads work. I'm here, I've had all this transformation. Where am I going next? Am I brave enough to take the next step? Am I brave enough to go in this new direction? And I'm kind of the one who stands there and is like, you should do it. Yeah. But I think in terms of family systems, I love that you brought that up. I did a lot of vision work when I left an abusive relationship 3.5 years ago, something like that. And I started doing a lot of like active vision work. I didn't even use any like chemicals to make that happen. I just kind of like did it in my head. And that was very powerful for me, like connecting with like future versions of myself and previous versions of myself. And in the work I was doing as a therapist, I kept hearing about this thing called internal family systems. And being a Capricorn, I was like, this is the next big thing. I want to get trained in this. And it's hard to get into the trainings. So one of my friends was like, you should really just like have a couple sessions with an IFS therapist. And I was like, okay. So I signed up with this woman who happens to be queer and older, and she's such a dear mentor of mine now. And she's my therapist. And when I tell you, like, that nice lady handed me my ass in that first session. And I met like a newborn version of myself, who I was an extremely colicky child. And so I would scream for 5 hours every day for the first 5 months of my life. And that was just, so I was like born feeling too much. And when I met that pre-verbal person and had an experience with them, I was like able to give them the care that I myself did not have. And I opened my eyes and I looked like this woman and I said, fuck. And so I've been with her for over a year. But internal family systems is like this idea that we sort of have, we have parts of us within us. So there's like different versions of us and from different moments in our lives. And they're all sort of in the background running around, right? And you have protectors and then you have exiles. Okay, so exiles are the ones who feel like the uncomfortable emotions like shame, sadness, etc.
It's kind of what we as witches would call shadow work.
Yes,
a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. And the thing that makes it really, really shadowy and kind of kinky, in my opinion, is that you're not shaming any of these parts. So like, for example, I remember this one time, and sort of this, I guess is like a trigger warning for like a bit of fatphobia, but like I was up at night and like, how the 3 a.m. voices go. They're not nice.
No.
Those voices on that 3 a.m. beat are mean. And so there was one that was saying like things about my body that were making me feel, really upset and everything. And I said, what is it you really want? And they said, I just want mom to love us. I said, Mom's not going to love us if we lose weight. So can we go back to sleep now? And they were like, okay. And that's the kind of work that you do as a witch, but it's also codified within the system called internal family
Oh,
systems.
I love it.
Like, just
Mhm.
speak.
The other thing I would have said is, and I love you.
Yes.
You know, that's enough. That's got to be
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah. But I love you and I'm here,
Yeah.
and I am extending my compassion and curiosity
Yeah.
towards you, and learning how to, even the parts that make you feel like really bad about yourself, like they're there for a reason. They're there to protect you from something really awful that happened that they don't want to ever see happen again. And so learning how to work to unburden those parts, and sort of, with my therapist, I do a lot of work of actually giving those burdens back to the elements. So
Mhm.
sometimes we'll like drop something in a volcano, or we'll, burn it up, or we'll like put it back in the earth. And it's very, very powerful work. And that's
That is exactly what I was asking about, that crossroads of healing, therapeutic healing, witchy informed, and obviously all that trauma of being different, being told that you're unacceptable, or that you need to change something about yourself to be worthy or loved. That's a struggle. And the truth that you've learned in the process is that you are love, and you are loved,
Mhm.
and you choose love for yourself.
Yeah. And that's an active thing that I have to work on every day, is learning how to love myself, and learning how to, and I hate the whole, like, you've got to like, I love what RuPaul says, like, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love someone else? But it misses the mark a little bit in my mind, because we need other people to love us, even when we are, not perfect, even when we're flawed, even when we're engaging in toxic behaviors. We need people to be like, I see you, I love you. And to heal in community is such a powerful, important thing. So I think it's important to learn how to love yourself, and also there are other people who can work with us to teach us how lovable we really are.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I also agree with the philosophy of like putting your own love out there, not holding that back. I struggled to, as a queer person, not wanting people who I feel very deeply bonded to as friends to feel, I don't know, as a younger, I was like, oh, I don't want to think I'm coming on to them, but I really love them genuinely, platonically. I'm not trying to get in their pants, just because I'm queer. And so just like giving yourself the freedom to be like, dude, I love you, bitches, I love you,
Mhm.
like, and freely love people, and that not have to mean anything more than
Right.
just genuine love. Because I believe that the love that you are able to give out and receive can come in equal balance, and equal measure. But if you're closed off to giving love, so often you're also closed off to receiving love, and that in and of itself is traumatic, and is probably a trauma response.
Yes, I agree with you. And you're speaking a little bit to the idea of like how open our receptors are to receiving love and to receiving pleasure. And one practice that's been very helpful for me in terms of trauma healing, and again, I hope this doesn't sound like toxic positivity, but just gratitude, like simple gratitude for things like, oh, I'm in this office and I can see this enormous, redwood tree literally right out my window. Every day I just get to like sit and commune with this tree while I'm working with people,
Mhm.
and like my water is like just the right temperature and just the right sweetness. And I've got like this money tree here that I'm hoping is okay, but I'm not really sure, and like being able to just like open your eyes to see all of that, I think makes you more receptive to receive other good things too. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And to respond to the toxic positivity thing, and then I'll let Shay talk. I had a friend send me a meme recently that said, this is you. And it says, me coming into your life to bless you with magic, and rage that you forgot you had. So don't get this wrong. We, we got the love, but we also have the rage, the
Oh, yeah.
righteous anger. And that's
Right.
not going anywhere either.
No. And there's so much to be angry about for
Yeah.
sure, and we're finally awake and, headed in the right direction. So yeah,
We
those are
hope.
a couple of the practices that I have found very, very useful.
I love it.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I do. I love the idea. And again, I don't think of it gratitude as toxic positivity. I think now at this point, it's we sometimes feel we look at we roll our eyes because that cynical aspect of ourselves is like going, seriously, does that work? But no, I do have found that even like you said, just seeing, oh my God, right in front of me is this beautiful tree. And you know what? I am really depressed and I'm really frustrated and really mad at the world. But right now I have this tree or I
Mhm.
have this soft furry creature in my lap that I can just pet
Yes.
and find,
Yes.
or a pillow that I can just hug and squish
Yeah.
or something else. And just finding that tiny little thing
Mhm.
to open yourself up to having more and being grateful for that, I think, like you said, opens us up to that ability to love. And sometimes that's giving that love to your friend, saying, hey, I love you, I love what you're doing, helps us recognize that what we see and value in others is often what's hiding in ourselves, and trying to find that connection and realizing, oh, wait, I love that Demona always makes me smile. Well, wait a minute. I sometimes make her smile. Maybe that's a little bit of myself. And there is a little bit in me that is lovable. And I think that's
Right.
finding that first little thing about yourself that you recognize as, oh my God, that's actually kind of a lovable thing,
Right.
helps you open up to that ability to start loving yourself and being able to share that love with others. And being able to, like I said, vision quest. And I would love for those who may not have any experience of how to do a vision quest without going down these super high, crazy, witchy processes that involve drugs and trauma, or not trauma, but drugs and
Medicine ceremonies
medicines
are
and
wonderful if you want to do that.
Travel.
yeah,
Yeah.
travel. Like what can you do in your bedroom on your bed at 4 in the afternoon
Yeah.
to help you go and start a vision quest
Well,
that may help you learn and approach your own healing process?
V taught me that I can talk to my future and or past selves.
Yeah.
Okay.
I often talk to my ancestors.
Mhm.
So I've been on a deep dive to connect with uh the ancestors spirits that I believe might still have some skin in the game in my life, I guess, if that makes any sense. Uh but I hadn't considered the I mean, I talk to my inner child a lot. I mean, I indulge my inner child a lot. And I heal my inner child a lot, but I really hadn't considered future selves
Yeah.
and or you know realizing that there's a multitude of levels to the past selves that we could be learning from.
Yeah. Um, I just want to say something about people who might still have skin in the game, because if there's anything I've learned through the vision work that I've done, it's that we are literally like fucking rock stars to everyone who's watching. I mean, this is the party. The Earth is where the party is at. There's a reason we keep coming back here, because we love it so much. And people on the other side, those entities, they are so much cheering us on and so much want us to succeed, and they're just waiting. And it's humbling to think about, when you're working, when you're doing that spirit work and you start opening yourself up, and there have been so many times when I've doing that, I've just been overwhelmed by just so much fucking love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one thing I wanted to touch on a little bit with this idea of queer friendship. And I think that that's it is magical. I think that if you are queer and you are a witch, everything you do is inherently queer and witchy, like everything is a magic spell.
Yeah.
And, a smile is a magic spell. Like the way you look at yourself in the mirror, the things you tell yourself about your body when you're looking at it, that's all magic. It's all magic. And I think that, I have found the most love and acceptance from queer people that I have wanted my entire life. And I think that when we've sort of like started to divest from this idea that saying I love you is inherently sexual, or that it's inherently romantic. Romantic is
Mm-hmm.
only one flavor of like hundreds of different kinds of love and relationship configurations. Like I deeply love and consider dear friends people that I hardly ever get to see in person.
Mm-hmm.
Or people that I basically only ever text with. I never talk with them on the phone. Those are all valid expressions of love. And being able to be that for each other, and again, like sort of choosing your own adventure and creating a beautiful, magical relationship that's like its own magic spell, I think is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree, and that is so beautifully said.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me that I was raised to be told a lot of really damaging things about our community and how we show up. And ever since I finally found my way here, I have just been overwhelmed by the love, like to the point that like my receptors shut down. And I was like, oh, you're ashamed. You're still ashamed of yourself. Like, what can we do about that? How can we help you?
Oh,
You know? So yeah, it's just,
I know that when I am in community space, whether that's queer space like pride celebrations or queer bars, or even witchy space, like when I used to attend the conference, pagan conferences, I know that I couldn't get from like point A to point B without both giving out genuine like, wow, I see you compliments to people, because people show up.
right.
And also receiving, well, I mean, I also show up, like I put the drag on as well, but like I do like point A to point B, like 5, 10, like multitudes of compliments being like exchanged,
Yeah.
and that's the feeling that happens so often in spiritual spaces and queer spaces. And being in queer space is a spiritual experience for me, and also being in witchy space is a queer experience for me.
Yeah, it's all
Yes.
I
But
remember.
that's what like feels like genuine connection that's not predicated on capitalism and weird social constructs that we're stuck in what we call like our mundane life or the overculture.
Right. Yeah.
It always seems like it's set aside as something.
Yeah. I think that that's another thing about being a queer witch, because we do live in these oppressive overcultures that are literally killing us. They're making us sick and depressed, and we need to talk about it, because you can't tell somebody that they're depressed and just say, oh, this is just your brain chemistry. It is, but also there's so many other factors involved in that, and like there's just a lot going on. And in my sessions, I try to be very explicit of like, we wouldn't be having the mental health problems that we're having here if we didn't have to work, 40, 50, 60 hours a week just to pay for eggs that are $9 a fucking dozen.
Yeah.
Like, this could all be different. We could make it different. We had a chance of the pandemic and we didn't take it.
Right. Or my favorite is, it's God's will that you're depressed.
Even worse.
Sorry, I just watched both of your faces just like get that like, ooh.
Yeah. Well, it's God's will. This is like your suffering. And that's very much tied, because I was raised by these people. People are like, how did the religious right? Well, and I'm like, no, I was raised by these people. I know what they want. They have been praying for what's going on right now since the 80s. Before that even. But that's an idea that comes straight from the Puritans, is that suffering makes you virtuous. Like, think about that for a second and think about how our society is set up. That's just like a lot to take in. There's no virtue in suffering.
No, because otherwise I'd be way more virtuous than I am now.
I mean, I think your virtue is doing fine.
But I'm just saying, I've been through some suffering. So
Right. And for me, when I was leaving my abusive relationship, that was something, I don't know. I still think of it. I'm still proud of the way I thought of it back then, but I basically said, I am not going to suffer this much and not alchemize every last little bit of this to help other people. I was like, Herman, bitch. Like, I was not going to go. I was like, I am not going to go through this hell and not have it come out on the other side as something that I can use to help other people.
100%, just like love, I do believe in the reciprocal relationship of healing. Whereas because we have to heal ourselves, we can illuminate the path for others. Now, we can't tell them how to do it. We can't tell them to take the steps, but we could stand and say, I've been there, you're valid, and this is what I did. And these are maybe some options available to you. But, we can both be in healing together.
Right.
And I was going to say, I had a slightly different experience, but also 2015. It must have been a transformative year, where I also my marriage ended, and I was on my own and stepping through those processes. And thankfully, it wasn't an abusive relationship. We had been high school sweethearts. No one's the same at 14 as they are at 37. So it's just, we had gone on different paths, but there was still some things and some trauma around the religion and growing up in the church and all of those things. But always knew that I was different, and stepping out of that and stepping into something else. And it made me realize that at one point in time, we tried to reconcile and move back in. And it was only like 2 or 3 weeks. And I realized how far I had come in stepping into my own authenticity, in that, hey, I'm not ready to hide. I don't want to hide who I am anymore. I want to be and acknowledge that I am queer. I want to acknowledge that I'm witchy. Hiding those parts of me was toxic in itself. The relationship may not have been, but hiding, that aspect of trying to hide and put down, was toxic. So because of that, like you said, walking the path for others. So being able to set that framework and say, I can listen and I can understand what you are going through. And we keep going with that Trevor project. It gets better. It truly does. It's just being open and finding the tools that we need and the paths to walk and the people to listen and love us as we go through, then process through that trauma. That's the hard part.
Right. Yeah. I had a moment much like yours. I remember it was this one night. I had just told my husband that I wanted to divorce. It was kind of mutually agreed upon, but I really did initiate it. And I think this is a really poignant aspect of being a queer witch, is that I'm here for the transformation. I am here to continue growing. I am here to continue being a better version of myself to the best of my ability. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I've got all kinds of shit, but like, I think that, there's a lot when you realize, it's like, once that bell has been rung, it can't be unrung, and we're ones to ring the bells.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is something that's really powerful, because a lot of people don't come here for that. They aren't here on this ride of earth this time to do that. They're here to be comfortable, and that's fine, for them. It's never gonna be fine for me, but it means that we often outgrow situations and finding ourselves needing to look for a different shell because this one doesn't fit anymore. It's very much the medicine of cancer, which we are in a chariot year. We're in a year ruled by Cancer, and Cancer wants to be sweet and comfy and bond, but it's like, eventually the shell's not going to fit, babes. Like, you got to get a different one. And that's great, because there are crabs waiting for yours.
Calling it a hermit crab.
Yeah. I had this moment when I was just leaving my husband, and I was out, my little one, he was, I think, barely 2 at the time, and the moon was full, and I was just sitting out on the grass, and he was trotting around in his diaper. And I just had this realization. I only knew of 2 parts within myself at that point. There was the part who wanted to be wild and passionate and creative, and who was too much for everybody. And then there was this good girl Christian part who blew her hair dry and hot rollered it every single day, and was always perfectly made up, and wanted to like have the ring and the man and the house, and like do things just so that she would be whoever it was she thought she needed to be. And I thought those 2 people were going to fight for all of my life. I thought it would be the work of my life to keep those 2 getting along. And for the first time sitting out there, I was like, we're not fighting anymore. And that was a really powerful moment. And I was like, well, I guess I can't fight with myself anymore. And that's what I've tried to do ever since. And it's been, I don't know, however long it's been. It's been a minute.
That's truly the lesson on listening to your intuition.
Yes.
Is being willing to sit with all those parts of yourself, whether or not they conflict, and find the peaceful balance, the peaceful agreement, what we all have in common,
Right.
and what they need us to hear.
Right. Yeah.
And live a life in alignment and in accordance with our own truths, and not based on what society and or religion or parents or whoever else has chosen for you, for us.
Yeah. And I think that that's, for me, like, my sort of next frontier that I'm working on with my trauma healing is embodiment. I've done a lot of stuff like up here, and now it's more, how does my body factor into this? How does being like a non-binary person, dysphoria, chronic pain, all of this stuff. And my therapist and I are learning that I carry like a lot of wisdom in my belly, which is funny because I like have a lot of conflicted feelings about my belly, but a lot of shame in my lower back, which is where I suffer sometimes very intense pain. And so working with that, I had a moment of like somatic awareness when the morning after I left my abuser. And I woke up and I just like felt this calm in my belly that I did not remember when the last time that I felt. And I was like, well, shit, like I can't go back. Belly says no.
Yeah.
So,
There's a reason they call it your gut instinct.
I know. And it's like, it's just been interesting to sort of reframe a lot of like the really awful fat phobic messages I was given as a kid.
Yeah.
Within the context of like, oh no, this is my wisdom. It's bigger now.
The goddess was many of the goddesses were made with curves. So
Oh yeah. Yeah.
She-
There's a reason for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Society is wrong. What is real, you have to get out and see it. You know what I mean? Don't let people's pre-programmed images and goddesses comes in every shape and size.
Yeah. I think too, understanding just how wrong society is and like how this sort of like video game they're making us play is, it's just interesting to me when you start to step back and realizing it. And I think that the willingness to, like you said, step out, and be like, I don't know. Okay, so we're all this back here didn't work. And so I don't know what's next. I don't know what it looks like, but I do know I have to take the first step. And having the courage to do that, I think, is something that a lot of humans just don't want to do. And that's fine. Again, like there are many reasons why they can't or don't want to. But I think I think for me, at least, that's something I inherently tie to being a queer witch, is like being the one who's going to take the step, being the one who's willing to do that transformation, And
Well,
like
and they're
the chariot years, so like we're all like in it.
And there are so many people who know they have trauma and want to heal, and they don't know how to get started. So if nothing else, I truly hope that there's enough in all of this that gets people curious and seeking their own healing path, and finding out what that means for them. There is one we touched on the cards a little bit, as Shay and I also do tarot, and have had and probably will have many discussions on this podcast about tarot. Can I ask you just a little bit more on how you use tarot is a healing modality?
Yeah. How do I use tarot as a healing modality? I think I spoke to you, I guess, this is coming back to embodiment and like concrete practices. Like for me, sort of like having kinesthetic reminders of things is really powerful for me. I started working with oracle cards, I think back in 2016 or something like that, and from there it was like the archangels appeared, they were like the first ones, because that was like, I was like still going to church and stuff. And they're like, we're going to start you in easy,
Fair.
So fair.
Understand 100%.
Yeah. They're like, let's not intimidate her this time. So I think for me, like I started with that, and it was just very simple practices of like, okay, you touch the deck and you wait for a card to light up, and then you pull it, and then you look at it, and then you think about it, you probably journal about it. And it doesn't seem like much, but that is a practice that sustains me, to this day. I still do monthly tarot pulls. I often pull daily. I have an app, Labyrinthos, that I use, which is a wonderful, wonderful, completely free resource. If you want to get read to filth by like a digital deck of cards, I highly recommend Labyrinthos. It's
And
great.
we'll put a link in the show notes and everything else for that, because it's good to have.
Yeah.
But I think for me, like over time, the tarot has just been such a dear friend, honestly.
Yeah.
These archetypes will come up, and they often meet me if I'm, whether I'm having a good day or especially when I'm having a bad day. And just sort of like the alchemical process of like your guides whispering to you, and also the cards just being like, sweetheart, this is what we're seeing right now, and sometimes they don't have anything to say. Sometimes they're like, we don't have anything, do your dishes, go take a nap. You need to stay with a nap, bitch. You don't need us. I think also just like being able to know that resource is there, and that it's only interacting with what's already within me. I think that's really powerful because, you know, when I read for people, which I do professionally read for people sometimes, and that's completely separate from my mental health work. But I will often tell people, like, I can't tell you what's going to happen. I don't know.
Right.
And I would never want to tell you something and then you be sad or upset that it didn't happen. Well, all I can do is tell you what's here in this moment. And I think that's partially like an aspect of like mindfulness, of just like
Yeah.
taking breath and, you know, pulling a card and like being in that meditative state. And I have, you know, even as a therapist, clients will sometimes talk about tarot, and so we'll discuss it, you know, and I'm like, this clinician used mindfulness practices, you know, like that's a good way to put it because it's very broad. But yeah, I think for me, just like being able to connect back to my guides, connect back to my body, and then have like a tangible physical thing in front of me, has just like that whole combination, three-way marriage, if you will, is what's really, really potent and nourishing for me.
Beautiful. I relate to so much of that and
Mhm.
wouldn't have even thought to word it that way. So I really appreciate your answer to that.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you wanted to share with our listeners about your practices, or maybe if they wanted to look into services from you? That's also information I can always pop into show notes later. So if there's
Yeah.
anything more you wanted to share.
Yeah, well, in terms of that, like one of my ethical things is that I can't mention where I work here.
Yeah,
But
and that's fine.
definitely, I would just say healing is possible. You are wise, and whatever it is that happened to you, it doesn't completely make up who you are. So I would say that that's, you know, if you're thinking about it, you're already engaged in the process and on your way. And being able to trust that it happens slowly and over time. And one of my teachers, Lindsay Mack of Tarot for the Wild Soul, talks about life being very spiralic. And I think that that's really true. You know, we come round to things again years after they've happened, and we are freshly resourced, and we're in a place where we can deal with them in a new way, you know?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
sometimes when you're at ground zero, you can't always deal with it, and you just have to get out of the situation. And then later on, you'll be like, geez, that was really, you know, and then you're able to kind of like go along the way. So yeah, I try to really center like the people in the room with me. You know, I take what's called a person-centered approach. So you meet people where they are. You don't try to like, you know, be telling them they need to change or be different than who they are in that moment, and just let them show up authentically as themselves. And I think that that's something that's sort of newer to the profession of mental health, whereas before, you know, I don't view things from a medical model, you know, so I don't pathologize anybody.
Right.
Mhm.
Yay.
Yeah.
That's good.
No, and you know, I think that it's just something that you have to really be careful about, you know, if you're going to be a clinician, because you want to really be able to show up for who's here. And I really think that for me, my witchcraft and my queerness, you know, helped me to do that.
Mhm.
So yeah.
For me, it for sure informs my ability to be of service.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, all of who you are informs all of what you do, right? We're all running around with our very own personalized operating systems up here that nobody knows how they were coded, or like, you know, and like everyone's is different. Like, you know, in the 3D world, we have, you know, I don't know, Linux. Does Linux still exist? I don't know if Linux still exists.
Sure. I'm sure it does, because
We have Macintosh and we have PC. Those are the OSs. But
Right.
like humans, it's like there's 8 billion different ones. That's just like, that's
right.
amazing. When I think as I find humans endlessly fascinating, which is why I love the work that I do.
And in regard to healing, I always love to think about neuroplasticity in the sense that when you're talking about operating systems, we are reprogrammable. And we aren't our programming.
No, we are not. And I think that's something that people miss, you know, and that's why movement can be so powerful, you know, because it's very working things through the body, you know. This is like a little bit of a tangent, but I'm going to mention it anyway. I started to read a book called My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem. And one of the things, he's a Black social worker, and he did a lot of work with very high conflict couples, which I mean, all power to him, I can't. but, but he talks a lot about like the wailing circles and like the dancing circles that occur like in parts of Africa, you know, and we, and in other indigenous societies, as white people, we do not have that because we have been inherently brought up to believe that our bodies are dirty and evil. Thanks, Plato, for that, I guess. Or Socrates or whoever the old guy said that.
Old white guy.
Another old white guy. I think that you're really being able to connect to the body wisdom and movement helps with the neuroplasticity of the brain is where I was going with that total rabbit trail.
Nice. Good, noted. And also I know you do a lot of body healing practices as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some of the ones that I've been favoring lately, I think baths with magnesium was like real basic, but like very, very helpful, you know, just letting your body,
100%. That's a magical spell in and of itself.
Oh yeah, because you're saying to yourself, I'm giving you a place to be held and to be safe. You know, that's how
the womb waters
with the world.
Of the earth.
You know?
Yeah.
We evolved in water, both
100%.
as newborn babies and as a species, we evolved.
Yeah.
So that's really powerful, I think. And another thing along that line, I guess, is like, I like to make oils. So I make like body oils and like infuse them with different intentions. Like, you know, sometimes I'm like, I need a little more play and fun in my life. So I'll put in like, I don't know, tangerine oil or something, you know. And so and other times it's like, I need to feel more grounded. So I might do something different. And that's like another way. And when you rub that on your body, you're saying like, I love you. You're beautiful. You're perfect. You don't have to change. You know, you're fine. So.
And you dance like nobody's watching.
Yeah.
And you sing like nobody's listening.
Yes.
Or like everybody's watching and everybody's listening.
Exactly. Yeah.
Those are both embodied healing practices.
For sure. Yeah. They've definitely been helpful for me in the last couple of years. And I think makeup is too, you know, like we all took the time to beat the face today and it was beautiful, you know, and I think that makeup also, I work with Venus, so of course I think that makeup is a magic spell.
Oh yeah.
It is. It's my drag. It's my mask.
Yeah.
And it's you know, it's about having fun and playing with what you got and accentuating. I'm not trying to hide nothing, but I am trying to turn it into a coloring book.
I love that. Yeah, that's really, really cool. I think that exploring makeup has been something that's been really fun for me. Like, I still have this moment of like, oh, this is just such a bold color. And I'm like, for who? What of it? Like, just slap that on and be a peacock.
I have a friend called me an absurdist because, you know, color my hair. Yeah. I like to do things absurdly, I suppose.
I don't know.
I don't hate it.
Yeah.
I have a question. You had mentioned again, what was it, the process that you're doing with
Internal family systems.
Internal family systems. Are there any links? I'm really fascinated, and for myself, but also for our listeners, and I know else may have it. Are there links that you could send us or give us that we could put in the show notes that could talk a little bit more about that? So those who might be reaching out and looking for a therapist can say, hey, I heard about this. Can we walk through this kind of process to kind of help deal with that system and those ancestors and everything else that shape the way we are?
I can definitely recommend some resources. You can read books about it. And I think for witches, for a lot of us who are already doing this work, it feels to me like a very intuitive process. And then I can also give you a link where you can look on a directory and actually find an IFS therapist if you want to do that.
That would be lovely.
Fantastic.
I've been working with this modality personally since for about, I don't know, 15 months or something like that now at this point. And I went through a 16-week training on it that was actually geared specifically towards queer people. And then I was finally, after like a year and a half of being in the lottery, I did get selected for their level 1 training. So at the end of the year, I will be in the directory of IFS therapists, which is
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that for you.
Thank you. I'm very excited.
And I like when you, just as, you know, friends kind of remind me that that stuff exists and, or share with me part of your healing experiences. Well, I
Awesome.
am so delighted that you agreed to come in and be our first guest, not guinea pig. But it felt so comfortable just having you chat with us about these topics that are so important, and so helpful to people like me and maybe other people who relate to queer trauma and the healing journey.
Yeah, thank you so much, both of you, for having me. I really feel honored, and it's just, these are things that I love to talk about, so I'm glad I got a place to talk about them.
Really, really thankful. It was a lot of information and a lot of insight that, again, I think and will help a lot of people recognize the things that are holding them back and how they can look for ways to seek truth and new paths to help through their healing.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much again. You
Thank
both
you.
Yeah, I was when we were talking about gratitude, I was just sitting here like, oh, I just have this stack of beautiful faces in my life right now, and that makes me very happy. I'm
Yes.
so happy to just have this space and time with both of you, and
Yeah.
deeply appreciate you setting your time aside to talk with us today.
Yeah, I'm so glad it worked out.
Thanks for listening to the Queer Witch Project. If you enjoyed this topic, follow, leave us a comment.
If there is a topic you'd like to know more about or an episode you would like to suggest, contact us at thequeerwitchproject@gmail.com or find us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram with a handle @queerwitchproject. We upload twice a month. And remember, queerness is a key to magic.
Be yourself and love rebelliously.
No worries.
Look, if I'm not making Shay get her run of the money with the editing, are we even doing it right?